Hello chaps and chapettes. I do hope you are very well today. So, today I'm doing a little bit of a different history of review. Instead of the plane, I'll be talking about one of the crews. Today I'm speaking of a Lockheed Hudson A16-201 of the 32nd RAAF Squadron, the Royal Australian Air Force Squadron. War brings us many tales of bravery. It also brings us many tales of loss and humans coming to terms with the horror of it. And this is one of those stories, really. There's quite a lot to do in this story. There's quite a few different parts to it. It's not got a very happy ending, but it's a very interesting tale nonetheless. So let's start off. 22nd of July 1942, Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. Pilot Officer Warren F. Cowan, Pilot Officer David R. Taylor, Sergeant Russell B. Pollack, and Sergeant Laurie E. Sherrod take off at 11:30 local time. Their mission was to shadow Japanese ships and attack targets of opportunity. Now, let us have a little bit of a chat about the Hudson. The Lockheed Hudson was derived from a 11-seater commercial passenger plane. The Hudson was considered an odd choice for a light bomber, but it was a good choice. It had a very good lift capability to it, and it was quite manoeuvrable as well. It was initially ordered by the Royal Air Force, but ended up serving with many of the Commonwealth Air Forces and even the United States Army Air Force. Although by the mid to the end of the war, the Hudson was outclassed by larger bombers, the Hudson was had a very successful career, mainly due to its great manoeuvrability. It also had the honour of being the first Allied plane to down an enemy aircraft flying from the British Isles. Earlier victories had been flown from carriers or from France by ferry... Oh gosh, I'm trying to think of planes now. I think it's the Blackburn Suka and Fairy something or other. One of the ferries, one of the early ferry planes. Anyway, it had that honour to it. It also had a rather unique distinction after damaging U-570. The crew surrendered to the plane, meaning the Hudson of number 269 Squadron captured a German naval vessel. Not every day you can capture a German ship with a plane. It was also the first plane from the United States Air Force, or the United States Air Corps, any United States Air Company, to kill a German U-boat as well. And it was also the first aircraft to make an attack in the Pacific Theatre, sinking Japanese transport ship Awazan Maru on the 7th of December 1941 at around 9:18 AM Hawaiian time. Now that's quite an important time if you know history. It was around about an hour before the attack of Pearl Harbor. It was the sort of first attack on the Japanese, the first attack in the Pacific Theatre, and it was the first successful attack on it. By I think it was the Royal Australian Air Force that had the first strike. Now let's carry on with our story. As A16-201 took off at the naval airfield, as A16-210 took off at the naval airfield in Laos, the other side of New Guinea, Lieutenant Jushin Sase had received orders to provide air cover for the Japanese troops landing in Buna. Troops had already landed and gained a beachhead, and were now bringing supplies ashore. 6 A6Ms took off with Pilot Officer First Class Saburasaki leading the second flight with his 2 wingmen. Saki was disgusted with the disorder he saw as he reached his patrol grounds. Buna was a shock to me on my first patrol. I'd seen many landing operations before from the air, but never had I witnessed such a pathetic attempt to supply a full infantry division. Soldiers milled around on the beach, carrying cases of supplies into the jungle by hand. Only 2 small transports with a single small sub-chaser as their escort stood off the beach, unloading new supplies. What dismayed and disgusted the Japanese airmen was an open invitation to Pilot Officer Cowan. It was a true target of opportunity that the Australian airmen could not resist. Saburasaki. Without warning, a series of tremendous explosions rocked the beach area. Columns of flames and smoke erupted into the sky. The beach was thrown into a massive confusion as thick black smoke started to rise into the air, recounted Pilot Officer First Class Saki. The Australian pilot had scored a bullseye. Quickly, the Japanese pilots began to look across the sky, Saki saying he had spotted a tiny black dot on the horizon diving away. The Japanese fighters opened up to full throttle and gave chase on the diving Hudson, which had now levelled off just above sea level. Sake was shocked to find that with its bomb loads gone, the twin-engine bomber was more than a match for the Zero. However, giving chase on the level, the Japanese fighters started to catch very, very slowly. The pilots held their nerve until they were around 600 metres off the bomber. Sake fired off a short burst, aiming to force the plane into a turn and then go for the kill as it was turning. Of course, if the plane turns in this sort of direction with a plane behind it, it gives you a very good opportunity to take it out. Either way, from top or bottom. Sake was taken by surprise at the enemy pilot's actions, however. No sooner had he fired when the Hudson went into a steep climb, turning to the right, and rolled quickly. It roared back with full speed at me, he said, and his flight of fighters. I was surprised for several moments. I sat motionless in the cockpit. The next second, every forward-facing gun on the Hudson opened up with a withering barrage, said Sake. He and his flight of 6 had to perform a major defensive manoeuvre, and the 6 planes scattered in the sky like a flock of startled birds at the gutsy move from Cowan. Cowan now flew like a man possessed, doing everything he could to avoid shots from the Japanese fighters. The 2 gunners on the Hudson now started to spray the following enemies with a hail of 303 rounds, causing the Japanese pilots to break formation and go into a fight or flight situation. Saki feared his comrades were going to crash into each other in the carnage. The Japanese pilots, angered by the audacity of this bomber to outperform them in turns. Pilot Officer Cowan was managing to outturn the Zeros, one of the best fighters of the time. In a twin-engined bomber, he did this by feathering one engine and putting full power to the other as he performed high-speed turns, which confounded the enemy. Finally, though, a heavy burst caught a rear turret. I saw the gunner throw his hands up and collapse without the interfering stream of bullets from the turret. I closed to 50 metres and started shooting, explained Sake. Suddenly, white gasoline vapours spewed from the Hudson's left wing. The plane was now crippled. Sake now directed his fire to the left wing, closing to 30 metres. All 6 of the Japanese pilots, it seemed, had gotten their revenge on the Australian plane. The bomber was now burning and heading to the jungle below. Sake recalls that the pilot was trying his hardest to make a controlled crash landing, but as the plane hit the treetops, it ended in a giant fireball. As the Japanese pilots returned to their base, the pilots were sullen. Not only had they failed to protect the resupplying efforts at Buna, but they had also been utterly humiliated and outflown by a lone bomber, while they flew possibly the best fighter of the time. Word spread quickly across the base at their loss. Not only of the Japanese pilots, not one of the Japanese pilots who flew against the Hudson felt victorious. We had to marvel at the skill and bravery of that pilot. It didn't matter that he was an enemy, Sake remarked. A-16-201 was found shortly at the end of the war, strewn across a large area near the village of Popoga, near Burna. The remains of the crew were recovered and given military burials. There we go. Historian Robert Piper has been working since 1984 to bring recognition where it was rightfully due. Reading numerous citations for the VC, he believed that the pilot officer would fit right in for a posthumous award of the medal, saying that if he were an American, he would have been given the Medal of Honor. On February 7th, 1997, Pilot Officer First Class Sake wrote a testimonial letter on behalf of Cowan and his crew to the Australian Minister of Defence. In a very disappointing and shameful response from the Government Minister Ian McLaughlin, he wrote... Sorry, I'll try and get across now. Scroll down. He wrote, "I'm informed by RAAF HQ that no provision exists to seek approval for posthumous awards for wartime service which occurred over 50 years ago. I'm also advised that there is no evidence that Pilot Officer Cowan was nominated for an award of heroism as a result of his service in New Guinea. Under these circumstances, I regret that it is not possible to accede to your request." Which is very sad. Although extremely sad, the crew of A16201 did not receive the awards they deserved. They will be remembered for their bravery, both from their allies and their enemies, with the utmost respect for their flying skills. For every Medal of Valour given, more than 100 people or more are passed over, with stories that justify the recipient's reward. But even if they do not gain the medals they deserve, they will be honoured in records kept for future generations to see. And this is one such case. Okay guys, well, I hope you found this one interesting. It's a little bit of a different sort of history of / story I sort of thought I would bring up. As you'll see here, I've got the letter from Pilot Officer First Class Sake up on the screen. And I would recommend having a look at some of the other stories in the Second World War. There are many interesting encounters and interesting tales from the war. Sadly, many of them do end like this, with sadness, because the crews involved did not make it home. But they still brought great honour, they still did a great job, and they still did an amazing feat. What I would recommend is just have a look through your history books, have a look through memorials and records. It's always interesting to see, and at least if we can honour them with keeping the memories alive, hopefully that's enough to keep them happy. That's all I can say there. Although I do think that Pilot Officer Cowan was worthy of some more honours than he did receive, unfortunately. An interesting thing I did discover from doing this little record, although I was sort of mainly doing it for this story on its own, I did discover that Pilot Officer Cowan lived very close to me here in Adelaide before the war, and his relatives are still alive. He left his wife, of course, and he also left 2 children, sadly. Okay guys, until next time, this is Screezilla out. Let me know if there's any stories that you'd like me to look at. Let me know if you liked this video. Let me know if you found this interesting, something you'd like to see more of. Bit of an experiment video, this one. But if you would like to see more of these videos, let me know and I'll try and do some more videos honouring the brave men and women who served in war and served in these machines of war. Okay guys, until next time, this is Scree out. Thank you very, very much. Bye-bye.